have been born in California, where the sun always shines so bright. I should have been born in California, where the girls all dress in white.
All right, hello there, thrill seekers. And that was a piece of a song called California, which I wrote and recorded around 1988. And I didn't re-record it. I didn't do anything to it. That's exactly the way it was when I recorded it on a Fostex 4-track cassette recorder back in, I'm going to say 1988. I've lost any sort of documentation, so I'm just kind of going off memory. But that song is kind of relevant to what I wanted to talk about today, which is my musical career. And this is inspired by a snarky, mean comment that I got, a week or two ago, I don't remember, on one of my musical videos that I put up, in which somebody said I'm LARPing being a musician. LARPing, for those of you who don't know, is live action role playing. So I'm like faking being a musician. So I thought I'd talk about that and talk about how it kind of worked into my Zen thing, because I think it might be interesting or useful to people. So here goes. As you know, I've been putting up musical videos on this channel for, more than a year now, and it's something that's a recent-ish development on this, and I've been really enjoying it. And my music videos get about 1/10 of the number of views as the Zen videos. So if I put up a Zen video, it might get between 1,000 and 3,000, sometimes 5 or 6 or 7,000 views. And a music video usually gets, they generally get at least 300, but sometimes 500, sometimes 1,000. But I don't think I've had one that went over 1,000, and I don't mind that. That's just fine. And I don't know, maybe I can try to tell you the reason. So, as a lot of people know who've read my books, I was a member, and still am a member, of a hardcore punk band called Zero Defects, and I joined Zero Defects in the summer of 1982, I think. I pretty sure I joined the band just around the time I graduated high school. I think maybe slightly before I graduated. Maybe I joined in May or April of that year. I'm not sure. And the band broke up subsequently about a year or maybe a year and some later, and then reformed in 2005, which is why I say I'm still a member. Zero Defects, the only recorded legacy of Zero Defects from back in the day, as they say, is this compilation album called The New Hope. This one I'm holding up is a reissue. I couldn't find I have the original issue somewhere, but the reissue looks exactly the same. But they added an extra album, so it's a double album now, whereas it was a single before, and it was a locally made record of a bunch of hardcore bands. We all pooled our money and resources and put out this album. Most of the money and resources came from a guy named Tom Eakin, who was in a band called The Dark and is still a friend of mine even today. The only other sort of legacy of Zero Defects on vinyl right now is this, and this is our 1983 demo, which we had hoped to put out in this form more or less back then, but it never came out. And then in 2007, this nice record company called Get Revenge, based in Knoxville, actually put it out. And I don't know if you can find this anymore. I don't know how many copies. They probably made a couple hundred copies, 700, 1,000, I don't know. Not many. And after that band ended, I submitted a bunch of cassette tapes to a record label in New York City called Midnight Records, thinking that maybe I could get on a compilation album. I had been making all of these sort of neo-psychedelic songs, which I didn't know there was a sort of a genre of it. I was just really into 60s rock and this sort of obscure 60s stuff. and I sent a cassette of my stuff to this record label called Midnight, and J.D. Martignon, the president of Midnight, liked it and wanted to put out albums. So eventually Dementia 13 made 5 albums for Midnight, and I've got 4 of them. I don't have the 5th one. The first one was called Dementia 13. And this one I like and I still think is good. I'll give you my little quick ratings. Second album we did is Mirror Mind. The best thing about this album is the cover. I think I got a little bit too ambitious on this one. On both of these I played all the instruments myself. And I think I overstepped what I was able to do. And one of the things I've been doing on this video channel is I've been re-recording songs from this album. And so far I've done Mesmerized, 20 Years Before My Time, Mushroom Season, let's see, I think I did Twice the Speed of Time, Rules is a Rule, and Naked Truth. So I've done most of this album, but redone because I didn't like the way I recorded them. This is the one I'm most proud of. This is called Disturb the Air. This is the 3rd Dementia 13 album. Came out in 1989 and was produced by Glenn Racy of a band called Plasticland. And to me, this is the record that I can still listen to it all the way through even now and be like, yeah, that's a pretty good record. Somebody should reissue that damn thing, even though I'm the one who's on it. And then the last one I own is a TV Screen Head. And once again, I played all the instruments on this, but this was sort of the crop of songs that went on this also included California, the song that I just played. If you looked on my other video, you can see a whole video of it, and it was at the beginning of this. And these were all done on 4-track cassette recorder at my home. But I was a little bit shy about putting things like California out. And the reason I chose that song California is because I always feel like there is a good example of what went wrong with my musical career. Because that song, to me, I recorded in around 88, and to me it sounds very much like the stuff that Beck started doing about 5 years later, in the early 90s. And I don't know if songs like California or some of the other ones that were like it would have been hits or indie radio darlings. I have no idea. But if I had put them out, at least I could have said I was doing the stuff Beck was doing before he was doing it, which I was. But now I don't have such concrete proof of it. The Wikipedia entry about me, which I haven't looked at and I didn't bother to look at before making this video, but the way I remember it the last time I looked at it was that it made it sound like because I failed at my musical career, I moved to Japan and got into Zen. This is not true. A lot of things that you see on Wikipedia are just not true. I got into Zen in the early 80s when I was still in Zero Defects. I'm pretty sure I was still in Zero Defects when I first started practicing Zazen and learning and all this stuff about Zen. And it was an ongoing facet of what I was doing in my life while I was also trying to, make it as a musician. But the way the Zen thing kind of figured into that goes like this. If you follow Zen philosophy, Buddhist philosophy of all kinds, one of the things you will find in there is a kind of disparaging attitude towards seeking fame, and a kind of disparaging attitude towards ambition. And if you want to be a career musician, it's almost impossible to do so without having a lot of a desire to be famous and a lot of sort of ambitiousness. And I was, at the same time as I was trying to make these records work and become popular, I was also reading a lot of this philosophy that told me don't be ambitious, don't try to be famous. And so it kind of scuttled my career in the sense that I don't think I had much desire to be famous. I had a desire to do music as a career, and I wanted to do that. But I didn't really feel like being famous was something that I was really concerned about. I just wanted to do the music. Now, one of the things that's happened in my life is I've kind of picked up and put away music at various points in my existence. So picked it up really big in my teenage years, and then at circa 1993, I guess, I'd recorded an album, a Dementia 13 album, and then had some big fights with Midnight Records about the nature of the album, what it was going to be, and I finally was just like, oh, screw this. I'm not going to do this anymore. Because it wasn't making me any money, and it was just giving me lots of frustration. And at the same time, kind of coincidentally, I was able to get a job in Japan teaching English. So I went to Japan to teach English, and I think I brought one guitar with me. No, I don't think I brought any guitars with me. Yeah, that's right. Because one of the first things I did when I got to Japan is I bought a guitar. I bought this weird Rickenbacker copy, a Japanese-made Rickenbacker copy. I wish I'd kept that because it was really nice. It was called a Session Rocker. It said Session Rocker where it would have said Rickenbacker on the headstock. And I had no intention of trying to further my musical career in Japan, but there were a couple of guys who lived really close to me, a guy named Nick Wilding and a guy named Sam Fleming, and Nick was British and Sam was from Alabama. And they had a little band. They'd been living in Japan for about a year before I got there in this little town called Takaoka. And they had this band, and I joined their band. I kind of forced my way into it. And I brought this woman named Emily who they knew, but they didn't really know Emily as a singer. And I said, hey, we should get Emily to sing. So we got this band. And so with the intention of just giving up music, I ended up in Japan with a band. And that band wasn't very career-oriented, but we did some shows and they were quite popular. This being a really small town with not much to do, I think had a lot to do with how popular the shows that this band called My Niece's Foot did in Takaoka. But then everybody else, Emily, Sam, and Nick all left Japan, and I was there. So I moved to Tokyo, got a job with Tsuburaya Productions, and was kind of content to just leave music behind because I was just like, this is not working. But I was still drawn to it. And at some point, I started to think, I want to make an album. But I knew that Midnight Records wasn't going to release my album, and I didn't want to go through the whole process of trying to get on a label or do any of that. And it occurred to me, and I think this is kind of a Zenish influenced way of thinking, that one person listening to a record is an individual experience, so one person listening to and enjoying a record and 1,000 people or 10,000 people or 1,000,000 people or 200 million people or whatever you want listening to a record is all kind of the same experience. So I thought, it doesn't really matter. I am going to make a record that I will enjoy. And that's what this record was for. And I didn't care whether anybody else even heard it. I remember I set up this little studio in this house I was living in Tokyo, where there was a window and I could see into our little garden that we had. It was a yard, much, much smaller than this one, but not too extremely different because it was just a lot of weird wild flowers growing in this yard. I didn't own the place. I was renting it, and so they didn't want me to do anything in the backyard, so I just left it the way they left it, and it was just overgrown with these crazy weeds and flowers. And I remember I would get up in the morning. I got up very early, like 4:30 or 5 in the morning, so that I could work on music until it was time for me to go to work. And Tsuburaya Productions, their office hours started at 10, which is kind of late for a Japanese company, but kind of normal for a film company because film people are all lazy. And so I would have several hours in the morning to work on making this record. And I made the record, and I called it Hovercraft, and I had a little website, and I advertised it for sale there. I would make it on a CDR, and I think 5 people bought it. And of those 5 people, I heard back from 2 of them who really enjoyed it. One of them was my then brother-in-law, Dave, who he subsequently got divorced from my sister. But he really liked the album, and I thought, well, I like it, and Dave likes it, and this other person likes it. I forget who the other person was, and that's good, and that's enough. And this is why, to this day, when I'm putting out these videos on YouTube, I'm fine if they have 300 or 500 views. It would be great if they got 10,000 or 100,000 or a million views. I would be happy with that. I'm not saying I wouldn't be, but I'm okay with that. Now, this idea of fame, though, the idea of shunning fame was, I think, in some way a misunderstanding of the Buddhist attitude towards it. Because I had a discussion with Nishijima Roshi about this when Hardcore Zen was about to be published. And I remember sitting with him saying, this book I wrote is about to be published, and there's no way to know what will happen once it gets out in the public eye. I, at the time, didn't expect much from the book, certainly not as much as it's gone on to become. But I thought, there's a chance I'll become famous from writing this book. And I said to Nishijima Roshi, well, doesn't Buddhism have this shunning of fame? Don't we shun fame? And he said, no, it's not like that. What the Buddhists are cautioning us against is pursuing fame. So pursuing fame for the sake of fame. So wanting to become famous as a goal in itself. Sorry, I'm tongue-tied. That's what they're disparaging in a lot of the Buddhist literature, Dogen included. But what they're not disparaging is the idea of doing something really well, and because you do something really well, music, sports, writing, whatever it happens to be, you become noticed by the public and therefore become famous. And Nishijima Roshi said that sort of fame is not disparaged within Buddhism. There's no sort of Buddhist edict or whatever against that. And actually you can see this in the literature. There are Buddhist teachers. I can't think of any offhand by name who I could name, but I know I've come across this in Buddhist literature where there will be a Buddhist teacher who's a highly revered Buddhist teacher who will kind of brag about how famous he is. He'll tell you, there's 50,000 people in my Sangha or whatever like that. And it's not that they set out to become famous Buddhist teachers, but that because what they did was so good, people noticed it and came to them. Now, in music and in Buddhism, it seems to me that there are 2 kinds of famous people. One is somebody who courts fame and learns to do the thing, whether it's music or writing. I guess sports, to an extent, you could do this. Maybe sports doesn't count. Well, let me finish and you'll see why I'm saying maybe sports doesn't count in this way. But they learn to do the thing in the way that makes it most likely to become famous. So if you're a musician, you learn to make the style of music that is the most popular style of music and learn little hooks and tricks and things and styles and whatever. And you hone it down and you kind of go for perhaps the lowest common denominator. People who do that sometimes become famous, but I find that by and large, the vast majority of people who try that end up just getting nowhere with it. It's really kind of, I think for most people, a losing strategy. There's this very small amount of people who manage to make it by doing that, but it's usually a losing strategy. And you can go, if you frequent record stores like I do, you go to the dollar bin and there's just a million CDs and records by these people who are just doing this generic garbage music, right? And occasionally one of them becomes famous. The other way is you do what you do and you do it really good and people notice. And that's a different sort of animal altogether. There are people who just are good at what they do and people notice it, and if they continue to keep working on their craft and continue to be good, they'll get noticed. And that's the other category of a famous musician, and that's also kind of the other category of famous Buddhist master or religious leader or whatever you have. You have these kind who are just playing to the lowest common denominator of what sells, and then you have people who are just good at it. Now, one of the things that happened to me along the way doing both a sort of a musical career sort of and a Zen Buddhist study at the same time was that I often felt kind of guilty about the musical stuff. Like I felt like, oh, this is bad. This is not what I should be doing. You know, I should be meditating. I should be out and maybe join a monastery and shave my head and do all the things, you know, that you do, and be fully dedicated to that and just give up music entirely. And I do run into people all the time who have that attitude. I remember talking to a guy a few years ago who was very proud of the fact that he was now a monastic and didn't do music, and he'd been a professional musician for quite a while before that, and was, you know, he was making somewhat of a living at it. He wasn't becoming famous, but he was very proud that he'd given that up and thrown that away. And I thought, oh, that's kind of sad, you know, because I don't think there's anything in Buddhism that makes it antithetical, I don't know if that's the word I'm reaching for, that makes it not right to do art at the same time. A lot of great Buddhist masters have been artists. It's the main thing they get into is calligraphy or writing. You know, Dogen was a writer. A lot of other Buddhist masters are calligraphers, and that's an art. And you do it and you work on it, and it's not incongruous. I feel like for myself, the music is just something that is, I'm kind of almost compelled to do it. I think it's part of my karma. I've got to do it. And I'm going to do it whether anybody listens to it or not. The same with Zen, really. I'd be doing the same thing in Zen whether people were buying my books or not. I might not be doing a YouTube channel. I'd probably be, you know, quieter than that. But I'd still be doing the practice. And I'd still be doing the music whether people listen to it or whether they don't. And I think that's the important attitude towards it, you know. So that's what I do nowadays. I make these little videos for this channel, and a few people watch them and a few people like them. I happen to know, by the way, just in case you were wondering, that I am not a good singer. And this is not an invitation for people to go in the comments section and dunk on me to be about how bad my singing is, because I know it. And I'll tell you my funniest story about that, which is it was shortly after this album, Dementia 13, the first Dementia 13 album came out. I was still living in Kent, Ohio, and I'd gone out to some kind of a show with some friends, and one of the friends, I wish I could remember who it was, because I probably still know the person, but I can't remember who it was. Anyway, he got really, really, really drunk, and I ended up having to drive him home because there was no way he was going to drive. So on the drive home, he wanted to tell me about his impressions of this Dementia 13 album, and he goes, you know that Dementia 13 album? Oh, really? I love the guitar playing on that album. Your guitar playing is amazing. Some of the best guitar playing I ever heard. But you know what? You got to do something about your voice. Your singing is no good. You're just not that good. I'm sorry to be mean about this, but your singing is... You just hire another singer or take voice lessons. But you know what? Your guitar playing is great. Your guitar playing is great. I can't say any bad thing about the guitar playing. The guitar playing is wonderful. But you know... There is one thing that I have a problem with, and that's your singing voice. And your singing voice is terrible, but your guitar playing is great. And it went back and forth. Singing terrible, guitar playing great, over and over and over in a loop. And at first I thought he was joking, but then I realized, yeah, this guy really is so wasted that he has no idea that he's repeating the same thing over and over and over again. So Kent isn't a big town, so thankfully after about 10 minutes I finally got him to where he belonged, and I kicked him out of the car, made him go home and sleep it off, and he probably had a big hangover. So yeah, that happened circa 1984, I guess, and that was not at all the first time I had heard disparaging things about my voice. But I'll tell you what, and this is something I think is interesting. When I get together with some other people, usually other people who also think my voice is terrible, and we're playing music, the guy who steps up to the microphone is me. Like, none of these other people who've been telling me, Brad, you're such a terrible singer, they're not willing to stand up and sing something, and somebody's got to sing it, and I end up doing it. And this has happened so many times I can't even count. So I think that's interesting, because it speaks to an attitude which might be somehow informed by Zen, which is like, if somebody's got to do the thing, I'm going to do the thing, and I don't care that I'm not the best at the thing. I'm just going to do the thing. You know, in this case, it's singing. And nobody else wants to sing my songs. I had a couple attempts in my past at trying to get a lead singer to sing my songs, sort of like Pete Townsend did with Roger Daltrey. I couldn't find anybody who worked out, and they all had LSD, lead singer disease, which, ask your musicians friends about that. It's terrible to deal with lead singers. So I just sang it myself, and I don't care. I really don't care that people don't think my singing voice is great. I think it's fine. It does what it needs to do. So, you know, there's another lesson. I don't know what the lesson is. But anyway, I've gone on way too long already about this, and I think I've said all the things I need to say. So if you want to send me a donation, if you are on YouTube, can go to the links that are in the description of this YouTube video, or you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. So you can go to that URL, or you can just click the direct links that are below and send me a donation, because that's how I make my living. I don't make my living off records like this. I have to buy them myself. I lost the free copies or gave them away or whatever that Midnight Records sent me back in the day, and now I have to buy them on Discogs if I want them. So your support is important to me. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me, because I offer this for free. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Rock on. Hi Ziggy, what do you think of that music? What do you think of my musical career? Should I continue? Do you like the music I play? You got used to it. When we first got you, you seemed a little bit put off by guitar playing and stuff. Alright Ziggy, let's go inside and edit the video, alright? See you later. Bye.